How did the meeting with Chancellor Hammond go?
The meeting went very well. We reviewed where we are with the Brexit negotiations overall. Chancellor Hammond and I have met now on many occasions over the last number of months, and he continues to take a very constructive approach to the negotiations underway, while clearly looking for the very best possible outcome for the British people as a member of their government.
Any progress on the Irish border issue with Hammond today?
The Prime Minister May, in her speech at the end of last week, actually placed a very large amount of value on not only the achievement of frictionless borders, but there was also a very large number of references to Northern Ireland, to the Good Friday Agreement, and the unique responsibility that she has as Prime Minister to respond back to the consequences of the Brexit vote for Northern Ireland. So in fairness to what the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said today, he wasn't looking to take aim at Prime Minister May in any way. What he was doing was emphasising the need that we have to continue to see evolution and clarity from the UK in terms of their future customs policy, because customs policy overall is indispensable for understanding how we will deal with many of the challenges in Northern Ireland.
Minister Donohoe, do you have any idea how it gets done? Lots of references in Prime Minister May's speech, but no concrete details. How does a hard border get avoided?
Well, the agreement that we made with the United Kingdom through the European Union in December lays out the different frameworks in which that can take place. What we want, what the British government want, is we want these issues to be resolved in the context of an agreement between the European Union and the UK. And Prime Minister May did outline some further thinking on this at the end of last week. Obviously, we want to see that go further now in the negotiations that will take place across 2018. But we've also agreed with the UK, the European Union have agreed with the UK, how if those negotiations don't yield the desired outcome, the other contingencies that are in place. The second contingency being the role of Northern Ireland and the legal powers their institutions have. And the final one then being a backstop agreement between the UK and the EU about how that hard border will be avoided through regulatory alignment.
Who is closer to reality right now? Which blueprint, the EU's or, what Theresa May outlined on Friday, which wasn't exactly a blueprint, it was just a list of 5 sort of pillars, 5 wishes?
Well, look, there's a negotiation underway at the moment, and I guess we'll be clearer what views resemble reality as these negotiations continue and reach a successful endpoint, I hope. From the point of view of Ireland, we are members of the EU27. The views that they have outlined in their negotiation approach, we're very much plugged into that, and we support actively all the work that's underway from them at the moment.
Clearly May wants to leave the customs union, she wants to leave the single market, but she did state on Friday, Minister, that she wants to stay aligned in many areas, keeping EU regulations. Is that doable? Is that the sort of language you wanted to hear? Well,
I think the approach that Prime Minister May outlined about regulatory alignment across many different goods it's helpful to have that clarified at this point. It was also important to hear her talk about associate membership of a number of different European agencies. And while she outlined while Canada and a Norwegian approach will not work, she did re-emphasise again 2 different customs policies that they raised there last summer. From our point of view, of course, what's critical for us is that the integrity of the single market be maintained. That is really important to us as members of the EU27.
May speaking in Parliament saying confident, to use her word, of reaching an agreement with the EU. She's talking about the transition agreement. March was set as an initial beacon of deadline, essentially. Can a transition deal be reached by the end of this month or not?
Well, I believe it is possible that such an agreement will be reached. And clearly what matters, though, is that agreement in the entirety of everything that needs to be agreed. And what continues to be critical for Ireland is that the guarantees that we need regarding how a hard border be avoided, that those guarantees be maintained, because we believe that's just indispensable to maintaining the kind of progress that both the British and Irish government have now achieved over 2 decades.
Talk to us a little bit, Minister, about the jobs that are going to Ireland. Where do you stand there, and will more jobs get attracted to Ireland financial services-wise?
Yes, and they are, and where we see the clearest upside for Ireland across what will be many difficult economic consequences being generated by Brexit will be what will be happening in financial services. And we are seeing that happening. We have seen announcements over the last number of months from JP Morgan, from Barclays. We've also seen other companies indicate that they want to streamline their existing arrangements and locate them out of Dublin. So we believe across the coming period it will continue to be evident that Ireland has benefited from some of the financial services opportunities that are generated by Brexit taking place.
Trade has obviously become a huge issue here in the United States. How concerned are you that Ireland might get caught up in an international trade war?
Well, any change at all in the geopolitical environment around trade, of course, is something that is concern for any open economy, whether you be small or big. But I do hope in the coming days and weeks that a consensus can be reached and can be maintained on the value of global trade and some of the issues that are becoming particularly important at the moment, that a way can be found to deal with them. Because any deterioration in the global trade environment will be bad news for any trading nation, big or small. We are confident in the progress that we have made in Ireland over recent years in terms of broadly balancing our national finances, seeing our economy return to employment growth. All of these things have delivered the buffer that we will need to deal with shocks that could develop. But of course, we wish those shocks would not develop across the coming period.
Minister, I want to ask you about the Apple tax collection. We've got so much to chat to you about. We're going to move swiftly through the topics. Clearly, you're making progress. You've said the second quarter, you'll start to collect this money, this revenue. When will you receive the entire amount? What progress are you making right now?
Well, I'm absolutely committed to putting in place the right kind of procedures and processes to collect this money and put it into an escrow account. We disagree profoundly with the assessment that the European Commission have made in relation to our tax policy. But while we are contesting that in court, we will be meeting the requirements that we have under European Union law. To answer your question, we're now in the final days of a cooling off period, which is at the end of a procurement process for elements of how the escrow account will be managed. And we would expect then that across quarter two, the money will begin to flow into this escrow account that will be set up and overseen by Apple in Ireland. Regarding when it will all come in, I'm confident that it will all be deposited, but the timing of that is a matter that we will continue to work with the Apple company on. Could the EU drop its case
against you? I mean, given everything you've just said.
Well, that is a matter for the Commission and for Commissioner Vestager. And while we disagree with the assessment that they have made, of course, we recognise their policy role and their legal role in relation to all of this. I've met Commissioner Vestager now on a number of occasions, on 2 occasions now, over the last few months. And on each occasion, I've reiterated to her that while we disagree with the stance and the judgment that her part of the Commission have made, we'll meet the requirements that we have with them. And in the next few weeks, I think you'll see all the elements of the procurement process come to an end. And then after that, work begin on seeing the money flow into that escrow account.
Minister, just a couple of questions about the banking sector, AIB and permanent TSB among banks now selling bad loans, and there's some political pressure to stop the sales. I'm wondering what you say to investors who might be concerned about government interference here.
The work that we are talking about is regulation rather than interference. And we have had a regulatory environment in place in Ireland that has facilitated the disposal of a number of loan books from a number of Irish banks. Those disposals have taken place in a regulatory environment that has tried to strike the balance between the needs of our banking system and the needs of individuals who could find themselves in situations of vulnerability and great distress. And that's a balance that any government has to try to get right. Over the last number of years now, we've been very successful in Ireland in reducing the amount of non-performing loans we have, substantially reducing mortgage arrears, which is a legacy consequence of the economic crisis that we went through. And across the coming years, I will endeavour to maintain that we have the right air of policy certainty on key areas. But like any Minister for Finance or any government, we have to recognise the sensitivity of homeowners, concerns that they may have regarding whether they'll have a roof over their head in the future, and all of the worry that that can cause. And we're just looking to maintain the right balance as that part of our economy continues to.
And just on AIB itself, Minister, it's up about 20% since the Paschal IPO. The government still does own more than 70%. Shouldn't you be taking more profit now? Shouldn't you be selling a little bit more? When do you plan to?
I've always indicated that my key framework for doing that will be making sure we get long-term value back for the Irish taxpayer, and that all of the money that the Irish taxpayer invested in an exceptional bank in AIB, that we get that money back stage by stage by stage. I am not at this point going to indicate any further timing regarding when we will do that, because of course that will only influence market reaction when we get to that point. So I have it under constant monitoring at the moment, and I will go back to government with any further recommendation if I believe that is merited.